Let's listen to Jeremy Hunt.
The trouble is, if you leave it too late, these conditions can become established in a way that you might have to live with for the rest of your life. Whereas if you tackle it early, you've got a chance of, we don't like using the word cure in mental health, but you've got a chance of effectively making it a problem that doesn't come back, and that's a big opportunity missed. So we absolutely want to sort that out. And just while we're talking about the problem, the thing that is really bad at the moment is the fact that, because rightly the CAMHS services in the NHS say, well, we have to reserve our treatment for the most severely ill, sometimes people like Rosie get this terrible message, which is, we can't see you until you...
Rosie waited 16 months for mental health help.
Yeah.
Sick enough. In the Green Paper, there's an aspiration to move waiting times to 4 weeks. During the making of the programme, lots of the clinicians I spoke to wondered how that was going to be achieved, and they couldn't actually see how services where at the moment, particularly the national services, where people are waiting for 6 months and more, when there don't appear to be enough trained up staff, and I'm talking about psychiatrists, psychologists, mental health nurses, the whole shebang.
Failure of trustees.
To that 4 week, and actually is that 4 weeks, is that quick enough?
Well, it's not quick enough if it's an emergency. The long-term goal, and in fact I would say we won't have true parity of esteem until we have waiting time standards for mental health, just like we do for physical health conditions. But we have introduced 3, and we're looking at a 4th for mental health. And for example, the eating disorders standard, there's a 1 week standard. We want to get to 95% of young people being seen within a week if there's an urgent need for treatment. But it would be a slightly longer period if it was less urgent. But 14 months, 18 months is obviously totally unacceptable. So how do we ramp up capacity? Well, one of the criticisms of the Green Paper has been, why is it that it's taking so long to roll out? We said we want to do between a fifth and a quarter of the country by the time of the next general election, and people say, why are we waiting so long? Well, the reason is because we need to expand our capacity. So to deliver the Green Paper, which is a really ambitious plan, currently we have about 9,000.
That means it's going to get fucked up. It's a really ambitious plan.
8,000 people, so we'll nearly be doubling the size of the current CAMHS workforce, so they won't all be working in CAMHS, and that does take time. You've got to train up. It takes 3 years to train a mental health nurse. Psychiatrists obviously take longer, and therapists of all types take longer, and that's what is the cause of the delay. But in the end, there's no shortcuts to this. We actually have to have more capacity in the system.
And we should just say that CAMHS, we're sort of trying to avoid jargon, but CAMHS we can't avoid. CAMHS stands for Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services. You've already raised lots of the issues we'd like to cover in this programme, and I'd like to come back to some of them in more detail. But first, on that rolling out to a quarter of the country, what about the 3/4 that aren't going to get it?
Not funny.
I totally get that you're between a rock and a hard place. I totally get that you haven't got the staff, but the staff aren't there because there's been disinvestment for so long. It feels like something radical needs to happen if we're not setting up a time bomb for the future, because as you point out yourself, mental health problems, if we get them early, we can do something about later, and maybe we should play...
Got everybody walking around like they're dead, pretending that they're bloody dead, treating them as dead citizens, never mind mental health. Just you wait till they find out.
So much emphasis on not prevention, but on helping people.
Man doesn't even know who he is. He's got that fragmented. He doesn't. There's nothing going on anymore.
See, they are the most important people. The people who are, you know,
The men, not people. We're men.
But
men of the womb.
So many people from getting to that point. If you would have let them be seen straight away, I honestly believe if I would have got the help within a couple of months, I would have not been at CAMHS till I was 17, and that would have then freed up space for other people to be there. If people get the help earlier, that means that they'll leave earlier, they'll get the help that they need, and then they can go. But leaving people till they're so desperate and, you know...
They'll probably be dead before they get help, is what she's saying.
It's a no-brainer. What can we do to accelerate it?
Well, Rosie is absolutely right. So the first thing to say, in defence of what's been happening so far...
Jeremy Hunt, you're a right little...
3 years into a 5-year programme that will see a significant improvement, to see about 70,000 more young people being seen every year from 2020-21. So we are expanding our capacity even now, but my view when I looked at those plans as health secretary was that they didn't go far enough.
The plans in the green paper don't go far enough.
No, I'm talking about the plans in the mental health forward view,
Five-year forward view, yeah.
which was announced in 2016, I think, start of 2016.
Dodgy.
Which is a
Doctors.
very ambitious plan in itself for the whole of mental health, not just children's mental health. It says we're going to treat 1 million more people every year, an extra £1 billion of investment, and within that, an extra 70,000 young people every year. And actually, that clip by Rosie completely sums up why I thought we had to look at this very, very radically.
What about a suicide over debt?
What is the way that we can make sure that every young person,
BBC iPlayer, Albert Matthews, what was it called?
as quickly as they need it, in a way that nips problems in the bud? And we went through an iterative process.
No one needs nipping in the
top
bud.
psychiatrists in the NHS, some really brilliant people. And we all went on this journey, and we basically said, so our starting point was, well, shall we put more money into CAMS so that we can bring down those long waits that Rosie was talking about? And the more people we talked to, people said, actually, no. Even people in CAMS, they said, don't give us all the extra money. What you need to do is to put the money into prevention to stop these problems arising in the first place. We should always be the service for people with the most severe acute needs, but the real way to address this is to work with schools. And so what we decided to do was to set up a brand new service in partnership with schools, which would tackle people with mild to moderate needs, so people at the early stage of the process. And that is a very, very big change, and we model that on the success of the Talking Therapies program, which was set up as a separate program, is probably one of the best programs for depression and anxiety in Europe, and started in sort of about 2010, 2011. So it's a brand new service, and it's designed to do exactly what Rosie is talking about, prevention.
How do people get to that service?
Well, that's the service that will be in a quarter of the country
Right.
By the election, and we're piloting it this year. And
Not soon enough is the answer. Not soon enough.
when someone like Rosie comes to us at the NHS, we
There
don't
will
know
be
in
more
terms-
deaths.
The person who does know Rosie well is her teacher. And a lot of this is about trying to understand
Teachers!
if the problems
wow.
that present themselves
The
are someone who's a
teachers.
bit stressed out because they've got exams coming up, or their relationships.
The
are-
one who does know them well is the parents, you would think, you know,
Well,
the
there's something.
father and mother.
So we have actually spoken to people about their experiences with mental health care within a school's framework. I do need to say there's a thing about it can't be an either or. The message we're getting is it must be a both and. And if the focus is too much on treatment
Oi,
in crisis at the
teacher,
moment,
leave
it
our
needs to be
kids
shifted
alone.
towards prevention. We mustn't go all the way towards prevention and throw the baby out with the bathwater. But let's go back
no.
to the schools thing.
Can I just answer that point
Yeah,
though,
sure.
Sally? Because we agree.
Yeah.
And that's why our
Oh,
plan
Sally
is
and Jeremy,
to do
isn't
the
it lovely,
prevention,
Sally?
and also to have a 4 weeks waiting time,
Let me
maximum
at him.
waiting time for CAMS. So we want to do both, but the way that we will deliver that 4 week waiting time for
Deliver.
CAMS is by tackling more problems earlier, so that more people don't need to go to CAMS in the end.
Let's have a look at what we were told about some of the experiences in school. We have Shola.
I remember going to my secondary school once and it didn't go so well. Well, I was 13 and I had been given a bipolar diagnosis, and they tried to explain that to my school. The psychologist here tried to explain that to my school, and they almost didn't quite get it.
No.
Didn't quite understand.
Yeah,
And
standard.
up until that point, I was seen as being kind of a naughty girl.
Yeah.
Not someone who was suffering from anything, because it was hard for them to understand, and understandably.
Hard for them to understand anything other than their own sense of self-inflated importance,
Definitely.
self-appointed
As we're rolling
authority.
stuff out into schools, we're using organisations like Young Minds. And when I look at Young Minds with my previous hat on, when I used to be, for my sins, a management consultant, I look at the fact that
Oh,
it's
yes,
an
Sally.
organisation
Well,
with a
yes,
turnover
yes.
of £3 million, and we're asking charities with very, very, very limited resources
Charities.
to actually facilitate that schools piece. How effective can we realistically expect that
Get
to be?
fucked.
Young Minds are a brilliant organisation and there's lots of brilliant players, but that's the problem that we've identified. It's very fragmented around the schools piece. Lots of people are trying to do bits here, bits there. Some of it isn't evidence-based. Who's in charge?
Okay, well, first of all, what you're talking about
Nobody.
is probably a very
It's
accurate
chaos.
description of what happens now in schools, but it's
Go on,
not
Sally.
what we're planning for what happens in schools. So later this year, we will be announcing the 2 pilot areas for the new school service that we want to set up. We have learnt, I think it's fair to say, from the success of the Talking Therapies programme, to use the NHS jargon, the IAPT programme, which actually has had a dramatic impact increasing the number of adult...
But it's in CAMS for children, isn't it, the IAPT programme currently? Whereas the adult programme, you can access it through your GP.
Correct.
So one of the things people have expressed a concern
If you can get a GP, Dodgy.
still sits in
Joe Johnson,
adolescent mental health services, and so you've still got the same...
Simon Stevens, NHS CEO.
That may well be an issue now, but that's not what we're going to do for the new service. So the new service is not going to be a part of CAMS. CAMS is going to remain
Steve Barclay.
as the service of last resort for the people with the most severe mental health issues. Then the new school service will be set up as an independent service. And what inspired me was seeing what happened at a Catholic secondary school in
What inspired you? You should be doing what you're instructed to do,
Full-time.
what you're employed to do,
Like a 4
your
days.
duties.
part of the teaching staff.
Was this Hove Park School?
Yes, I think
Yes,
it was.
we've been there too.
Right, good.
They're in
we've
our
been-
third programme.
Well, we've been on the same
Yeah.
journey then.
Okay.
Oh
And
yes, it's lovely.
basically, the really impressive thing was that there was someone in the teaching staff, and what I learned from that is that there is tremendous enthusiasm amongst teachers to learn more about mental health and to do more about
Oh, I
it.
bet there is. Yeah, I bet
And
there is.
actually,
While they're all pumped up on Red Bull running around trying to shank them. I'm sure there is, Jeremy. Let's ask the teachers' unions.
the health worker I saw
Fuck
there
me.
goes and talks to families about crisis situations, identifies children like
Spies on them and puts them into social care by forced adoption. What? What? What?
psychosis, what's bipolar, what's the difference between anxiety as a clinical condition and anxiety just because you're worried about your exams.
These are incredibly complex questions. What happens when Ofsted are banging at your door?
For
saying
teachers, they are,
you need
yes.
to improve your standards on education. There are lots of other priorities for schools.
Yes!
How are you going to ensure that what happens is evidence-based?
What we
Instead of
realised
bullshit.
was that we have a big
Assumption.
state apparatus, the
Presumption.
school system, which actually knows quite a lot about individual children. And if we can work in partnership with them, they actually understand their
What?
children far more than we do in the NHS.
Ships,
And they can help
children,
by
schools.
children with issues early, but they need to build up understanding.
So we're coming back again to the question, I guess, of when. And one of the young people we spoke to who we featured in the series, Alex, when he heard that I was meeting you today, said, could I ask you a question? And his question is, when will it be compulsory to have a counsellor and mental health discussions in every single school in the UK?
We've had good discussions
Now.
with
Let's have it now.
the Education Secretary
We demand it.
about this.
Demand
and
it.
We would definitely like to see
Education
more
Secretary.
basic knowledge, perhaps
Okay,
in
then.
PHSE classes on mental health. It's really a question of getting
Bullshit.
a consensus between
Money.
the NHS and
Austerity.
the school system as to what is the evidence-based
Slimy.
information that we can tell people about mental health conditions. But that is definitely something that we want
Tell
to
them
take
that they're
Can we
all-
expect some funding?
Tell them they're all classed as dead. They can fund it themselves with their equitable asset, which is their signature as a man in personam,
We're having
Jeremy.
ongoing discussions with DFE about the right way forward. What could be
Department for
sensibly
Education, DFE.
child's broad education when it comes to understanding mental health? Because personally, for all the discussions we have about the obesity crisis, I think most children
40 years of government investment for obesity, they're leaving the fattest ever.
now we've got to encourage them to do more to eat the healthy food,
Well-
but they don't leave school knowing about the key things you need to do to look after your mind. And that's something which,
No, the government mine your mind, yes, and they take your sanity and they steal your sweat equity, children. Yes, my brothers and sisters of the younger kin, come to splspro.com, search Indiglo on YouTube or SPL's Pro on YouTube. Find us, hang out, come and chat to me. I'll tell you what's what.
So the problem with that is we now know much more about the brain, and we know the brain isn't really fully formed until we're 25, which
Let's have some monatomic gold then and colloidal silver, please, Sally.
at least I'm using as an excuse to explain a lot of my youth.
Still teaching bloody Darwin's theory is a fucking truth. Fact.
This is difficult. Working out what should happen in schools is difficult, but getting out of services and having to leave child and adolescent
The earth is round. Oh, is it? Let's see proof.
almost all the young people
Looks like it's flat to us.
with problems on their 18th birthday, and sometimes actually on their 17th birthday, depending on
Legal
the
birthday, 18.
that they had, and sometimes even on their 16th birthday. So I'd like to play you Tiffany now.
Oh,
She can
God.
tell us about her experiences.
Straight before my 18th birthday, I got transitioned to an adult unit. I was the youngest there by far. It's kind of a big smack in your face in a way because everything's so different. Just because you've changed number, you've got a year older over one night, it doesn't mean anything else has changed.
Yes, it does. Legally.
You're still the way you were the day before.
Tough.
You still need the help you were getting, and then changing the help that you were getting so quickly, so suddenly, isn't always the right thing to do.
Overnight.
For people.
Lose your
You're
funding.
kind of left to your own, kind of more than anything. Unless if you're on one-to-one and you're having a conversation with like a support worker or whatever, there's literally no conversation between anyone. It's just like either watch TV.
Soulless entity. It's a machine, a corporation trading for profit. Search Dun & Bradstreet. They just drop you
Well, I
like
think,
a hot coal. Soulless, evil corporate entity.
And the jargon word we use is transition.
Don't give a fuck.
People do feel like they're falling off a cliff edge when they
A flat earth.
care of CAMS and then they move into the adult services. And so, you know, in the short term,
Neglect.
as well, NHS
Breach of duties. Dereliction of
some
duties.
financial incentives to encourage staff
Financial incentives
to join up.
to buy yachts and go on rich holidays, you know, odd areas.
There are parts of the country that have started doing 0 to 25 mental health services.
And we did speak to Birmingham, who were doing that, but they said there was no new money.
No.
No, well, we have now got a new
Bonds and treasury, yes there is, thumbprints.
moving forward.
Assets.
And I hope that will.
Your national insurance number is your exemption number. Claim on that.
Well, I think one of the things it will definitely allow us to secure is a continuation of the progress we're making on mental health. But I think I just want to point out, though, because I think there is a cultural problem which is highlighted
politicians.
by what Tiffany was saying, and it's
Cultural
not just
problem.
about mental health. We have
Money,
built up the NHS
crackheads, in
to
politics,
be very good
paedophiles.
at dealing with single issues.
Sorry.
You know, if you need your hip replaced, we find you a hospital. You don't have to wait too long. and
Too long?
You can go and have that hip
No, you
operation
don't have to
done.
wait too long.
What we haven't been good at doing
Want it
is
now.
looking at people with more complex needs, where we put the person
All
at
right
the
then.
centre and we
Look
wrap
at dodgy
a care
doctors.
plan around
Just stand
them.
alone.
And that care plan goes
Answer
with
me.
them wherever they go. In the
Jeremy!
NHS. Now that really matters for people with mental health, because a lot of people with mental health have physical health issues
Man's
as well.
reading from a script, it's bullshit. He doesn't care, he has no emotion.
They're linked.
He's paid,
Health
he's a drone.
are one of the
His
contributors.
family's sorted.
Health.
Private care.
Just seeing them as a mental health patient doesn't work. You've got to see them as a person.
As a
And
man.
likewise, there are plenty of people with physical health conditions whose mental health needs get overlooked, like disabled
We are not
people, for
persons,
example,
Jeremy.
who have
I
a-
am the
a
living beneficiary, and so are our younger kin. The living beneficiary walking of the land.
Then we see them as the disabled person with their physical health needs and not. So what we need to do properly to change this
Properly?
is to take people like Tiff
Just right and proper.
care plan, one of
Andy.
all your needs, mental
Aye, aye.
and physical, and then the service delivering those needs may change over the course of time, but actually the care plan doesn't.
How can we expedite this? Because the services don't have the capacity to do it yet.
We should be doing it already, Sally. We haven't. That's a fact of a failure.
More funding for the NHS. Everyone's
More
delighted about
funding.
hopefully some of that.
Search the what is it called? The Rayner report. Is it the asset managers, asset strippers handbook?
I think it was the Joint Select Committee's response to the Green Paper said that hundreds of thousands of young people over the next few years were going to miss out.
Well, I
No,
thought
they
their
won't.
response
No,
was
they're
very
not.
unfair, actually, because
The
I think this is a
sovereign
very
paralegals
ambitious
are coming.
programme. The central point I would make to them, and it actually answers your question, is There is no silver bullet other than to
Silver
increase.
bullet? No, there's colloidal silver though, Jeremy, let me tell you now. Kills 650 known pathogens.
Money, but even if you have the
Don't
money,
give us that, do you?
it still takes time.
You're
because
killing
you
us.
still have to train up people who
Social
are going to deliver these
Minister
services. So
care.
this isn't something that you can solve overnight, but this is
Yes, it is.
mirrored
Yes, it is.
by the challenge with
Overnight.
older people, because we
Demand.
have maybe 1 million more over 85s in 10 years' time. And in the end, the only way that we're going to be able to look after them well is
In the end.
by increasing the capacity of the NHS and social care system to deliver the great care that we want. And that's what we have to do in mental health.
And let me come back to that idea that you were talking about earlier about the parity between mental health. And, you know, another bit of jargon in the Green Paper, you talk about we have legislated for parity of esteem between mental and physical health. Let me just play you another couple of clips.
I think initially it was down to the fact that I had an underactive thyroid, and so everything was just being played off against that. I'd also had a bit of kidney problems, so they were saying, oh, you know, it's because your physical health isn't great, so we think your mental health is just being affected by that. So if we fix the physical,
We think.
it's going to be so much better after, which wasn't the case.
I think people do really need to realise that mental health problems and mental health disorders do cause death, and they do cause severe damage to people. It's not just because we're weak or because, you know, we can't deal with life. It's an actual illness. You would never say to someone who has a broken leg, oh, just deal with it. It will be fine, you know. Again, someone with a broken leg would never just be left and, you know, oh, you can fix it by yourself, or we'll see.
Because they're suffering from monetary sadness, yes, they don't know who they are, they've got no fiscal remedy, they've got these quantitative easing and federal banknotes and court papers trying to bang you up left, right and centre. We're using, private banking notes, yeah. Technology's overtaken us leaps and bounds, yes. When technology is needed for infrastructure and commerce and, the corporation of which I used to be a slave for, yes, and they invest multi-billions in technology. Why are we still using a shitty paper system from hundreds of years ago? The fiat currency that's going to fail. The NHS is going to fail. They're privatising everything. Get into the private now. We are doomed if we don't.
Commissioning groups,
They are killing us
the NHS,
in the public.
are now obliged, it's mandatory as of this year, to increase the proportion of their spending on mental health. So they can't do what's happened for many previous years, which is to raid the mental health budget when they have budgetary pressures
Although
elsewhere.
the Young Minds Stop the Leak recent report based on Freedom of Information requests suggests that is still happening since 2012.
Well, I can't say that it stopped
Lies.
immediately everywhere, but I do know that this year it is mandatory for all CCGs to increase, they are not allowed to increase their mental health spend by less than their overall budget is going up. So that has been an important change, but I don't want to say that's...
CCG, county care something?
What will parity of esteem mean? Well, I think it's two things actually, and we've got to be really careful here that we don't solve yesterday's problems tomorrow. So I think if you ask most people in the mental health world,
You can't solve any problems at all.
they would say
Ever.
it's
Fact.
increase
Solve
waiting
one.
time standards for mental health
Clever
conditions, so that you can be as confident
Bullshit.
that your mental health condition will be treated quickly as you can be if you
You are
break
killing
a
the
leg.
kids.
And I agree with that, and that is definitely something that we...
Shite in me mouth, baby. You're shite in me mouth.
But we don't get it entirely right in physical health. And
No.
what we've learned in
You're
physical
killing
health
everybody.
is that although the NHS
And the
is
nurses.
about average internationally for how long you have to wait for your care,
Please stop.
we are actually behind international standards in terms of our outcomes. So our cancer survival rates are not as good as France or Germany.
We are the lowest, Jeremy.
Both physical health and
We
mental
are the shittest NHS in the world.
health.
Kazakhstan is better than us.
Making sure that
India.
people don't just have quick access, but they have access to the types of treatments that genuinely deliver an improvement in your mental health condition that solves the problem. And
The
that's-
Primary Care Service Provider Trust actually operates efficiently, no doubt, or they go private and have mandatory insurance. And if you can't afford the insurance, they give it you.
evidence-based, and that's why we put a lot of effort into CBT, because the evidence base is strong.
Bullshit, cognitive behavioural therapy, it's not that great.
So my colleagues and myself, they're going to be very pleased to hear you say that. Jeremy Hunt, Secretary of State for Health and Social Care, thank you very much for coming out to talk to us
Sunday.
today. I'd also like to thank all of the